my family, myself, and my community. But everybody has the right to choose. That is simply my choice. And with that said, my freedom-loving friends, thank you for watching. Thank you for being with me as we call out wokeness, tyrancy, because I do believe we all deserve something much better than that. We have that. If we know what to avoid, if we call it out, and therefore we can put our time, attention, and North Star compass of our heart in directions and outlets that will actually fill us up with something beneficial to us. Maybe just magnify our social expression rather than dampen. And if you're like me and you like to be guided not by Disney, but by God, feel free to check out the latest design in my merch line. God, either got them or you don't. It's always available. So anyway, if you want to check out the latest design, go to my website, onlywithjp.com. And with that said, I will see you next time. Hey there, my friend. Thank you so much for watching this video. Now, if you are a freedom lover, I would love to invite you to join my Freedom Lovers community on Locals. It's free to join, and it's as easy as clicking the red join button you'll see on your screen right here. The community is fully uncensored. I think that I can hear anywhere else on social media. So if you would like to be a part of our Freedom Lovers like-minded community, hit the red join button, and I will see you on the inside, Freedom Lovers.
$69 device melts belly fat and builds incredible abs. An ingenious college athlete from birth.
For being here. Tonight, we're sitting down with Dennis Kucinich. Dennis served 16 years in the House representing Ohio and has long been known as the voice against the Iraq War. But Dennis has also been championing causes that were long considered fringe. Yet today, they're rising in popularity, especially amongst populist ideas like reining in on the surveillance state, bringing home troops, and rethinking trade agreements. He's also long supported ideas that are popular amongst progressives, such as universal health care and free education. Dennis, thank you so much for joining the show. It's really great to sit down with you.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for the invitation, and also I do the show, but this is really important to have the discussion we're going to have going forward because of what's happening in our world and in our nation at the moment. So thank you.
Yeah, you have been long known as one of the few voices against war. And I kind of want to start with that, with the Democratic Party and how it just seems that for a long time, there were voices amongst the left that were more against war. But now, interestingly, we're seeing these voices coming from the right. We're seeing more Republicans voting against the increased military budgets or increasing funding to Ukraine, or actually the ones calling for peace are coming more from the Republican side of the aisle. Why do you think that is? Well, what has happened?
There's a number of different dynamics here. One of which, you're right. I mean, there's been a shift among the Democratic Party of people who seem to favor conflict, and that's remarkable. Back in 2002, I organized 126 Democrats to vote against the Iraq War resolution and laid out chapter and verse why we didn't have to go to war against Iraq. 126 Democrats, that was more than half of the Democratic caucus, and people really involved to oppose the United States involvement in the Iraq War. Today, the latest is that a group of congressmen identified more with the progressives held back a letter that was kind of weak, asking for reconsideration of the war in Ukraine. And they did so under enormous pressure. What's happening is the Democratic Party is closing ranks behind the Biden administration's foreign policy. And that means congressional Democrats. That means members of the House and the Senate. And there's some idea that this unanimity will lead to an electoral success in 2024. I would argue the opposite. I would argue that as it is revealed that our efforts in Ukraine have not only demolished their country and used its people as pawns, sacrificed their sons and daughters to some wild idea that the United States can take down Russia and conquer the rest of the world. We find ourselves in a situation where the kind of group cohesion, which does exist within the Democratic Party, has become toxic. That there's no questioning what's happening. And if there is, it's very few people. So I think this is more than problematic, because if you don't have a robust debate over matters relating to war and peace within both political parties, you put the nation at peril.
Yeah, this is something that has really, I think, confused many of us who are watching on the sidelines. I've never been in politics like you've been, so you have an inside knowledge of how it all works. And so many of us are very confused. I mean, we've seen progressives from the left, such as AOC and Ilhan Omar, and now they're being confronted by anti-war activists, mostly from the LaRouche organization, that are confronting them at these events and saying, why are you continually pushing these policies, or supporting, or at least not standing against them, to the point where we're butting up against World War III and you guys aren't doing anything about this. It's amazing, because all of these politicians were voted into office with the idea that they were going to stand up to the establishment, that they were finally going to go in there and, because we've seen the Democratic Party shift over the years, especially as they decided to take corporate money. That really changed the dynamic, and it really made it to where we don't have two parties. We have one uniparty that just pretends that they're two different parties. They're really fighting about cultural issues, but they seem to be lockstep in line with one another when it comes to some of the biggest decisions that face our country, especially like war. So what is it? What happens? Why is it that these people got into office? They were voted in with a certain idea. The people backed them for that, and then they get there and they suddenly seem to fall in line with the establishment. What kind of pressure is on them? Is it just, what is it from your perspective that causes this shift?
There is a pressure towards consensus. There's no question about it. I mean, if you run as a Democrat or Republican, you, upon election, join either the Democratic caucus or the Republican conference. And there are group pressures for homogenization? Absolutely. And for people who raise questions, particularly if you're new, you suddenly are approached by leadership, which will say, well, you don't really understand this, and they'll prey upon people's lack of experience. It's particularly easy with foreign policy. So, and then in addition to that, you have the major defense contractors who contribute liberally to both political parties and to certain candidates. That further complicates it. You have people who are looking for help in their districts, and they feel that if they buck the establishment, they'll get shut out. That's a factor. What comes in often last is their constituents. And when I remember in 2006, when the Iraq War was a hot issue, and in the primaries, the Democrats backed candidates, even knowing that the people wanted an end to the war. The Democratic Party backed congressional candidates who were basically for the war. And people in November voted Democrats in, not knowing that they elected people that wanted to keep the war going, And so what happened when the Democrats took control of Congress in 2006? They decided to keep the war going. You know, people wonder, how did this happen? I voted Democratic. It's supposed to change. Well, what people often do not understand is that once you get inside that beltway and inside the Capitol complex, it's like a magic box. One thing goes in, but what comes out doesn't remotely resemble the will of the people. And the consequences are severe for not only America, but for the world, right at this moment.
Yeah, it is strange, and I wonder where the pressure really does come from. You know, why do they come out different than the way they go in? Is it the money? You know, are they threatened with you're not going to get funding for your campaign? Are they threatened with you won't get any committee assignments? Are they just worried they're not going to be invited to parties? You know, and that's what that was a lot of my experience. You go ahead.
I don't think so. I don't think it has to do with not getting invited to parties. And I don't know how much it has to do with campaign contributions. But I can tell you this, when the Democrats are the party in power in the White House, there's tremendous pressure on House Democrats and Senate Democrats to hew to the White House's line. So this has much more to do with who's holding the presidency. And since you have a presidency that is marked by a very hawkish approach towards international relations, you have Democrats in the House will fall in line, and most of the Democrats in the Senate will fall in line. There are some leaders who believe that it's the job of members of Congress to support the president of their party. And that's nothing new. Where it becomes adverse to the interests of the American people is when the president of a political party happens to be on a path to war, where he and in the future she wants war, and the people around that president want war, and this is where we're at right now.
But it doesn't really seem like Joe Biden actually wants war. It feels like it's people around him. Right? When he actually seems a little bit more measured, even though he's not very measured. And as we've learned with like Nord Stream being blown up from Seymour Hersh's reporting, and the United States being behind that, that was a very bad decision to do. I mean, I do want to talk about that with you, but in many ways, it has felt like Joe Biden's been a little bit more measured than, let's say, the people around him would like it to be. Namely, Antony Blinken, I think, would like to go further into these aggressions than Joe Biden wants to. But yet Joe Biden himself almost seems to fall in line with the will of the people around him. Why do you think that is?
Kim, an administration is an administration is an administration. It's not just about one person. It's about a group of people. And the decisions that are made by a group. They're made by the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, by the Secretary of State, Blinken, by assistants in the State Department, such as Victoria Nuland. They're in on the decision-making act, particularly with respect to Ukraine. And while let's not get moist-eyed about the president, because he has, throughout his career, taken a rather hawkish approach on foreign policy. He and I have some agreement on domestic policy, but on international and foreign policy, we couldn't be further apart. So he takes, Terry Truman said the buck stops here. So the buck has to stop at the president. But you're also correct. There are people around him who may feel more strongly about these things for ideological reasons that, again, are adverse to the interests of the American people. And when it gets to the point where that small group of people are making decisions that effectively override the Constitution of the United States and the Article 1 role of the Congress of the United States, that's where you get into activity that is against the law, and that puts America and our nation, our people, in jeopardy. And that is where we are now.
Yeah, definitely. And really glad you bring this up. But just to recap that, you're saying that you believe that the bully pulpit is actually more in control of the narrative of the party. So if we had an anti-war president on the Democratic side of the aisle, then Democrats, you believe, would fall in line with that. So
I
that
think
is
by
very,
and large, good point. It's a very good point. I think by and large that's true. I want to make
Okay.
this clear. I don't think that Joe Biden is per se a warmonger. I don't think he is. I think that he would rather not send our sons and daughters into conflict and put their lives on the line. I don't think he wants to do that, but he's getting pulled in that direction for sure.
Yeah.
And he is giving a green light to certain things that could result in jeopardizing the lives of American men and women who currently serve, and could result in drafting hundreds of thousands of Americans into the service of the country for a mission that is wrong.
yeah, so he's not a warmonger, but he's also not anti-war. And he's certainly bringing us to the brink of World War III. And I want to get into that now. You know, I'm curious, are we even living in a democracy at all? Because as you mentioned, you know, they're making decisions that are not, they're not bringing in the American people into these decisions. The recent reporting from Seymour Hersh is that the United States apparatus, which whoever made those decisions, a group of people got together and they decided it would be a good idea to blow up the pipeline that went from Russia to Germany, and did it with the help of Norway. That is an act of war. I don't know how else you want it. That's an act of war, not only against the nation of Russia, but also against Germany. I'm surprised Germany's not right now freaking out and pointing the finger at the United States and saying, "How dare you?" Greta Thunberg style. It'd be nice to see them do that. You know, like, "How dare you? How dare you do this to us?" Because this was a massive act of war. But yet, why were the American people not brought in on this decision? If Russia confirms this reporting, so what I would imagine is happening behind the scenes right now is that Russia and Germany are both scrambling to confirm this, and they're going to all of the sources and they're trying to put the puzzle pieces together, and they're saying, "Is this true?" And if they confirm that it is, you know, I don't know what Germany's going to do about it, but Russia, on the other hand, could absolutely view this as an act of war and say, "That's it. We're going to war now. You guys have done something egregious towards us." Where were the American people in that decision to wage war against Russia directly? Why are we not being brought into any of these decisions? And it's not just this Ukraine conflict. It's been every conflict since World War II. We have not been able to vote on any of these conflicts. We've never really declared war. And yet we're endlessly in war. So are we really even in a democracy, or what's going on? We're being bamboozled.
Well, as someone who challenged every U.S. Intervention as a member of Congress, that took place while I was in Congress from 1997 to 2013, I do appreciate that our nation has been led down the bloodstained path to one conflict, one war after another, with, based on lies. Period. You can't put anything other way. Now, Seymour Hersh, as some people know, won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on the My Lai massacre back during the time of the Vietnam War. At the time that he wrote that story, there were many people who said, "This can't be possible. This never happened." But as the story held up, Americans began to understand that we were visiting upon a people, a horror which was inexplicable and indefensible. And Seymour Hersh's reporting brought that forward. Now, this latest report by Seymour Hersh has helped to almost annotate the narrative that many had already believed, and that is that the U.S. was involved in blowing up the pipeline. Now, people like former Secretary of State Pompeo, who from the start said it's Russia, it's Russia. Very hard to be able to make the case that Russia would want to cost itself $1 billion or more a day, and destroying a pipeline that would be a source of ongoing income for them. So what Hersher's written raises several very, very urgent questions. Number one, was this a violation of Article 1, Section 7 of the United States Constitution, which says that the war power resides in Congress and Congress alone? And I don't think there's any question about it. Of course it was. Which means, and there was a decided effort to come up with a rationalization that would say, well, we don't have to go to Congress. We're blowing up a pipeline belonging to another country or other countries carrying fuel to Europe. And that's okay without consulting with Congress. And you have to look at the reasoning why. This was to weaken Russia economically and open up markets for countries, including the United States, that have opposed Russia. I mean, it's a mafia kind of move, really. It's nothing you would think would reflect what most people hope the United States represents: honesty and decency and integrity and a forthright approach and in defending liberty. This wasn't what it was about at all. This was a dirty deal right from the beginning, kept Congress in the dark. So there's constitutional questions here that are going to be raised. There's questions of international law. There are laws that govern the safety and protection of pipelines. There are questions relating to the Geneva and the Hague Conventions that have to be resolved. There's questions that deal with putting civilian populations at risk, essentially taking away a fuel supply during, that would be available during cold months. So you look at the law of the seas, the law of pipelines, the international agreements, the Constitution of the United States, and more. And on every one of those counts, our government, the government of the United States of America, appears to have gone against U.S. law and gone against international law. Now, when that happens, when the law is repeatedly subverted, that could inevitably be considered an act of terror. There is no license to do that. I don't care what intentions are or anything. There is no license to do that. And an administration cannot do that without the consent of Congress. Even if they had the consent of Congress, it would have been wrong. But they went around Congress. So we have not heard the end of it. The implications of this are extraordinary. Russia has an international claim. Germany and other countries have international claims. And we have reached a new epoch in American history here, where the United States, the power of the United States, is being misused by government officials acting in their narrow capacities on behalf of 360 million people, without regard to the immediate short-term and long-term consequences. They could have put us into World War III with us. They could have put us there. I mean, we do not know where this is going to go as more and more facts come out. But let's face it, what Seymour Hersh did was apparently painstakingly reconstruct the entire narrative of the pipeline bombing. And it is shocking, really. And it goes beyond being disappointing. It is shocking, it is illegal, and Mr. and Mrs. America, there must be accountability. There must be accountability. And I would start with the Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, Victoria Nuland, and anybody else who was in and presenting that to the president, or look, maybe the president said that. Where are the Biden saying don't do that? There they're all together, let's do it, let's go bomb the pipeline. Really? Without, I mean, what's the thinking? What were they thinking? That no one would ever find out in today's world? To think that you can do anything, commit any kind of crime and nobody finds out, it doesn't happen anymore. Somebody's always watching. And so, it's magical thinking. And then you go to a point, well, we're the United States of America, we'll do anything we want. Where'd that come from?
And the fact that they were able to rope Norway, that was a big shocker, actually. I mean, I was thinking maybe Poland, it was obvious that some other country was in on it, but it was the question of which one, UK, Poland, Germany themselves potentially, but Norway, I mean, we always think of Scandinavian countries as being, not as interested in engaging in these things. But then again, the very next day, a pipeline turns on between Norway and Europe, and they've got the ability to make a bunch of money. And not only this, but this story that has come out should anger people in California, quite frankly. But of course, it won't. I'm living in the state of California now. We are experiencing currently extremely high heat bills, so high that, when I look at my neighborhood board apps where people are complaining about things or talking about things like lost pets or burglaries, every post right now is, what is going on? Why is my heat bill 5 times higher than it was last year or even last month? I don't understand. Maybe I have a gas leak, or these gas companies are price gouging us. And yet the LA Times has reported, well, the reason why the gas prices are so high right now, the cost of heat is so high, is because we had an unnaturally cold winter in the state. We needed more natural gas. We didn't have it. Why didn't we have it? Well, they even report, because we had to sell it to Europe. Because we told Europe, don't worry about being cut off from Russian gas. We'll supply you what you need. And they did. And what it's cost is the American people are now paying the price in a state like California. But, of course, the average person in California is not really putting the two together on that. But where do we go from here? How is it going to be year after year after year? So it wasn't just something that affected Europeans. It is coming home. It is affecting the United States, but people aren't quite there yet. Maybe if this happens over and over and over again, then they will start to put the pieces together. But, with his reporting on this, this does it does bring up the question of accountability, as you brought up. Who would be held accountable? And you list off all the names, and probably Joe Biden himself, since he's the guy that would have to ultimately say, green light, it's a go, let's do this. This also brings me to the Iraq War. A time you were very, very vocally very against the Iraq War, the voice against the Iraq War. You were demonized, you were smeared, people painted you as being the crazy one. And yet a lot of those people that were for the Iraq War, that pushed for it, have now later come out and said, well, I was wrong, right? We hear that, okay, I shouldn't have supported, I was wrong. But where's the accountability? I mean, it just seems like the only people who pay the price are the people who stand up against it at that moment. And then after that, there just doesn't seem to be any reckoning for all of these people from news. The same newscasters are on the air right now that push for the Iraq War, and they're the same people now pushing for the war against Russia. These people are still there. They're in the media. They're in Congress. They're in the administration. I mean, they're everywhere. Where is the accountability for the people who make all of these bad foreign policy decisions time after time after time again? Is there ever going to be accountability?
We can only hope so. And if someone believes in a heaven and hell, there'll be accountability. But there's 2 points here, what you just said. One is the shortages in California and where the gas going to Europe. Now, keep in mind that these energy interests are making money on the shortage in California, which the prices are going to go up, but they're gouging on prices in Europe, where people in Europe are paying 4 to 6 times what they paid previously for energy. This is changing the standard of living for people in California and in Europe as well, which is used to having a middle class type of economic structure. I would forget that the long-term effect of the machinations that went behind the Ukraine war will result in many European governments going down. I think Germany's government isn't for long. And here, their pipeline was bombed. The pipeline was going to give them access to energy, particularly during winter months, and it was bombed by their great ally. I mean, how does that play in Germany? I will tell you, I don't think that there's any way that the Scholz government is going to escape the consequences of this. Think about this. If you're an American ally and something is done to injure you, if any of us have a friend that goes out of their way to hurt us, how long would we want them to be our friend? Not for very long. So that's one point I wanted to make about what you said. The other thing is, the big picture here is that America has moved away from democracy. We're into an autocracy ruled by a few people, nullifying Congress, and that moves us towards something that is profoundly undemocratic. And complicating it is that the media has become the major media has become nothing less than a spear carrier for the government, a kind of supernumerary in this grand and grim opera, where we find whatever the government says, the news media becomes a chorus saying yes, of course. That's dangerous as well. And there's a false consensus that has been built in the United States about the Ukraine war. And the one thing that's going to break that, I think, is the cost as we go from 100 million to 50 million, 100 billion to 150 billion and beyond. People who are worried about heating their homes, who are worried about the price of eggs, who are concerned about feeding their families, who are concerned about paying their bills for health care and other things. They have to look at that and say, hey, what about taking care of things here at home? And I think we're going to see more of that. And we're also going to see more critical analysis in the Congress, particularly among Republicans, of what the administration has been doing with respect to this war, how everything has been moving towards an escalation, putting us on the threshold of World War III. The idea is that somehow Russia is never going to respond. Really? I mean, we're betting a lot on that when we think that we can send tanks, send longer range missiles, get ready to give them aircraft as has been requested, and keep on fueling the war at the expense of the lives of hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians, and that somehow Russia's just going to sit there and take it. I mean, how naive must we believe that we can keep on fueling this war and there's not going to be a response? Now, I represented a substantial Ukrainian constituency as a member of the United States Congress. And I've been to Ukraine several times, as well as Russia. And we have set, the United States has helped to set cousin against cousin. The Ukrainian people have been used as pawns in an international chess game that the United States has been playing. And look, I don't know of anybody who would want to justify Russia's invasion. However, we must keep in mind, we go back to 2012, 2014, where U.S. policy wanted to continue to put pressure on Russia, encircle Russia, set up military materiel, arms, missiles, so that we keep Russia in check, and then at some point move in and knock out their government and put in one that's going to be more amenable to us. What? I mean, the way I look at it, regime change begins at home.
Speaking of regime change, you often share a stage with Tulsi Gabbard, and though she has been very vocal against regime change wars, she's also stated publicly several times that she does view Islamist terrorism as a major threat to the country and to the world, and she does support targeted drone warfare in an instance like that. And I'm just curious from your perspective, since you two are often very linked together, and I do want to move on in this conversation at some point and talk about the way to bring all these third parties together and going into ranked choice voting and the efforts that you guys are doing, I think is really great. But is there a time in your mind when warfare is necessary, or you blanket anti-war?
We're the 21st century, at least last I checked. Every nation has the right of self-defense. America has the right of self-defense. Russia has the right of self-defense. China has the right of self-defense. Ukraine has the right of self-defense. Every nation has the right to self-defense. War should not be inevitable. Currently, we have an administration that does not believe in diplomacy and has actually subverted any efforts at reaching a negotiated settlement in Ukraine to the detriment of the Ukrainian people. No, I'm not for war. I think war is a racket. I think war is the antithesis of what we're on this planet for. And if we have evolved as a species, the higher cortical function should inform us that there's ways of settling our differences without killing each other. We're talking about neurophysiology here. We know that the lower limbic system, fear, flight, fright, all those things get excited in this country lately. That's not, if our destiny is there, then, we're going to be devolving, moving back towards a earlier definition of the species. But that's not who we are as people. We're evolving, hopefully, upward, and war doesn't match that. And in addition to that, I can make a philosophical argument against war, but the economic argument is there too. War ruins an economy. It's capital intensive, and what you do is you just waste a lot of money, but somebody's making money. You look at the profit sheets of all the major arms manufacturers, they're making money. I mean, war's a racket. I'm not the first one to say that. Spencer Butler, famous soldier, made that very clear. War is a racket, and we're locked in it. And it's part of what Barbara Tuchman calls a march of folly, where nations can be convinced for a time, go into war, wave the flag, beat the chest, come up with themes of national glory. It's all a lie. We have to find ways in this day and age of settling our differences without killing each other. And the lack of talent in diplomacy is concerning. And it can become catastrophic for our nation, as we have seen, if you reflect upon the deep meaning of the recent reporting of Seymour Hersh talking about the pipeline. If your people can just take us to the brink of war without checking with anybody, where are we? Why do they love war so much? Why? We need to ask that question, and it's not being asked. There are people who feel that war's just right. Really, war gives life more meaning. Really, whose life?
So I want to talk about this new, I don't actually know if it's new, but it's certainly something that you and Tulsi Gabbard are headlining, which is the Independent National Convention this spring in Austin, Texas. So there's a convention happening April 3rd through 5th. And I think the last time, if I'm not mistaken, before the pandemic, this was in Wyoming. And what you guys are pushing for is something very interesting. It would be sort of the ending of the two-party system in a way, kind of creating unity amongst libertarians, green, independents, all of these sort of the parties and the people that have not been able to, which is really the majority at this point. We're now seeing that the Republican Party itself and the Democratic Party, the actual support for those parties has shrunk well below where independents are in this country at this point. So there's this idea that maybe independents could come together and sort of unify around, changing this system towards no longer a two-party system. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit more about this. Like, what do you think we really could dismantle the two-party system the way it is? I mean, there seems to be some forces working against that, namely the Electoral College, actually, when it comes to the presidential election, winner take all sort of races throughout the country. Is this possible?
Well, let me give you a little preview of what I'm going to say at the event in April. First of all, I'm a Democrat. I have taken an independent approach as a Democrat in challenging my party daily for 16 years while in the Congress, and before that, and since then. So, and I think there are Democrats who are independent-minded. One of the problems of the primary system and the current political system is that it intensifies the hold that the two-party system has on our politics. You have to be a member of a party to run in a primary, right? Parties have rigged it state by state to make it very hard for independents to be able to qualify for a ballot. In some cases, you need hundreds of thousands of signatures. And I mean, the system is set up to protect the two parties. Now, what I will advocate and do advocate is independents voting Republicans vote in the primary. Well, let me tell you, I may be a Democrat, but I'm an independent Democrat. And I think that it's so important for independents to vote in primaries. Actually, my wife, Elizabeth, and I have been talking about this for years. She calls the approach party animal. That we should all be party animals for the primary. Vote in those primaries to try to affect the outcome. But then if it doesn't go our way, reserve the right to support an independent candidate. I mean, we need to change the equation, and in doing so, we make both of the parties more accountable, because if they're worried about a wave of so-called independent voters coming into primaries, they got to start looking to a broader constituency. Right now, they don't have to do that. They figure you get the nomination of one party or another, you're home free. Well, maybe not. And so my approach would be a little bit different. Take a party animal approach, get people to vote in primaries, even though they're independents. And again, I'm a Democrat. I'm an independent Democrat. I reserve the right to vote for whoever I want to at the election. The party it's up to the party to make the sale of why you should vote for their candidate, this Democrat or Republican candidate. But if they can't make that, if they can't deliver that, who says we're locked in? Are you kidding? Really? And, the Democrats have a real quandary here. The idea that somehow 2022 reflected an impermeability to a shift in 2024. Don't kid yourself, my Democratic brothers and sisters. And I think that if 2024 is going to show us anything, well, President Biden has been able to make a case on domestic policy. And, some would argue some aspects of it, but he's made a case. Foreign policy, they are a disaster, and they're in real trouble on that. If anybody wants to take that challenge to them in a primary or in a general election.
Yes, this Independent National Convention, this sort of idea to unify the platform of independents, green, libertarians, undeclared voters. It's very interesting. The idea, from what I understand from the reporting, is that this independent convention supports ranked choice voting, bringing back blockchain-backed voter identification, and so these are very interesting ideas, but they're ideas that are already out there. I don't know if you know the answer to this, because I know you're speaking at this event, you're headlining along with Tulsi Gabbard, but I don't know how involved you are with the independent national committee, or the people that are behind all of this. But there are other parties that have come out looking to do something similar, namely the Forward Party that is put out there by Andrew Yang. Is he at all involved in this? Because he's also advocating for ranked choice voting. There's also the Unity ticket.
I can't speak for him, but I will tell you this, that it's important for groups to come together to try to exercise some kind of collective power. But I see that as kind of the second step. The first step being, don't ignore the primary elections. Do not ignore the primary elections. Now, I know some people, I don't want to vote in the party primary. I don't want to declare I'm a Democrat or Republican. Let me tell you something. One can still be very independent-minded and enter into a party primary and reserve the right to vote differently in a general election. This idea that somehow we're all locked in once we do, go one way or another, that's not true. And so that's going to be my message. And I think it's good for people to I think it's great for people to coalesce. But put the pressure on the primary so that